You? Well, my questions about that.
Did Jim find money? Jim was gonna find some money.
Pope Catholic?
Did you find
Do we
money?
need a resolution to transfer money or anything from them?
Yes. We can take it out of our capital fund. We have a storm sewer installation account. We have money available in that, which is appropriate because this has to do with basically, well, water and sewer. So we can take it out of that, $5,300 we transfer our capital fund.
Can you write that up also, Anne Marie? During,
Yeah.
so we have it for tonight.
In the resolution?
Yeah, make a note,
So we need a resolution for that?
transfer will be made.
The transfer we do.
Transfer. If we transfer, yes. So can they approve it today?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and-
we can just add it to the resolution I wrote. If we
Yeah, just-
add one more whereas, this line number to this line number, then we're done.
Transfer from storm
So that's
sewer.
another whereas.
Yeah. If we just, before the therefore, if we just put in, whereas we need to transfer, this amount of money from this line to this line, we can do it in the same resolution. That'll be super simple.
I can just add,
So do we know
I can just
exactly-
add that to it when I'm reading it.
I'm sorry?
I can just add that to it as I'm reading it.
Yeah,
You want to do
we can just,
5,300?
5,300, yeah.
if you and I have 5 minutes, we can figure it out.
5,300 from the,
Okay.
Okay, so this is, other than that, we're fine. And, and then Tony, the concern, Dr. Barris's concern,
Yes, Prospect Street, after the last meeting, I left you a voicemail.
Yes, you did.
Okay.
So I accepted your opinion.
Okay.
which,
We went over there, the day after the last meeting, and I saw what you were referring to. 10 or 12 years ago, there was a repair done on Prospect where half the road had washed out, I guess. And Public Works had gone in and set, from my understanding, precast concrete blocks to reform a new retaining wall, if you will. And then they filled the road back in afterwards. Well, over the time, there's been erosion, water sheeting across the road, spilling down onto that one-time fix. And it eroded a lot of the gravel that was behind the precast concrete blocks. Well, we had quite a bit of crushed concrete in our yard, very inexpensive, but I like to keep some staged. So we went over there Wednesday with the excavator and loader, and we took a lot of that crushed concrete, filled all the voids in, and we brought even more in and capped it. So now from the top of that wall off the edge of the road up, it's covered, it's packed in, and then we put riprap that we had left over, drove that in there too. So it's pretty much a protected now solid sheet of hard concrete riprap. And I think we're very stabilized right now. So we did it in-house, we had the materials around.
good.
thank you.
For bringing it to my attention.
Yes.
Thank you, Tony, thank you very much. Okay, let's go to, well, it's not total new business. We discussed a little bit the food truck, the fee revised resolution. Where are we with that?
I have one here from the attorney.
No, yes, but I mean, they have to agree on the amount. We discussed $300 instead of $500.
I'm fine with that.
It's absolutely unacceptable to me.
Yes. Thank you.
I understand Dr. Barris's position. And I also understand the position of the festivals and the community is trying to encourage that, the food trucks. And I am also in favor of food trucks, but I'd like to, I think we might have took a little bit too big of a leap on the initial costs. So I would be in favor with the resolution of $300 to move forward.
Mr. Russell?
$300 is a step in the right direction. I sort of agree with Mr. Barris, so I think if you would do a one-time per event fee of whatever, $50, $75, and if we have 3 or 4 events, it would make up that $300. I understand probably with some vendors, the $300 even at that point's a lot for maybe one time. I I realize it's for an entire season, it can come anytime, but will we have 4 events in the summer here
I
for
guess
the
that's the point.
Actually, the way the permit was written, it permits the food truck to attend 365 days. So, and they do not necessarily have to be at an event. They could set up in a supermarket parking lot, for example.
Okay.
So as I've seen, some food trucks are doing, in fact, in the town of Dunkirk.
That would be fine. I guess where they're making their money is at our events when there's a large number of people to utilize that. I'm not sure. Maybe that might be a local food truck vendor advantage, but if somebody's coming from out of town, that would be a deterrent, I would think.
Well, the local food truck, the people that reside within the village of Fredonia and operate a brick and mortar restaurant do not have to pay any fee at all.
They're exempt, yes, so it would be
So-
out of town
I think,
exclusively.
well, we don't have any applicants as it stands right now, and we're up on the verge of the food truck season. So we've got
Yes.
nobody right now lined up.
We have one from within the village.
What I'm
Right.
thinking, okay, that's good, I think that's good news, but maybe we should lower the fee and just see how it goes for this season. Kind of see what happens this season, see if lowering it to 300 makes a difference. It might not, they might still think it's too much, and we might not get any applicants for the, but I think it's worth a try just to see how it goes.
I think we deliberated this very carefully within the committee, and the law has just gone into effect a month and 5 days ago, and I think it's very wrong to change a law that was so carefully considered.
The law,
So-
the law was considered carefully, and I believe that was done properly. The fee was meant to be adjustable. So we're not actually changing the law, we're changing just the fee.
That was a core feature of our discussion. So within the rental committee.
I think fees,
So we thought about it very carefully.
fees in every area of the village are always considered adjustable.
I do not agree at all. Absolutely
It's the
disagree.
law itself that you were working with.
So it's a waste of our time to have this discussion. It's a waste of the time to see this on the resolution. You have to wait at least a year before you discuss it.
I think the concern on the part of Festivals Fredonia is that if there are, let's say, 10 food trucks that were going to come this year, and they won't come because of the fee, and I'm not saying that it's going to happen, just saying that that's a possibility. I think their concern is that these food trucks are not going to come back again. I can understand that. Specific festivals are just starting to do better over the last couple of years. So I can certainly understand their point of view. Of course, this is totally up to the board as to where we're going. I just want to have a careful consideration of all places. I understand what you're saying. A year that hasn't passed, but at the same time, I mean, nothing is written on stone here.
Trustee Barris and Mayor Landis, were there any persons from Festivals Fredonia on that committee to offer input?
No.
Larry Fiorella was at the last meeting.
What?
And I can tell you
What
that
meeting was that?
La-
On what day?
About 2 weeks ago? When
Okay,
was it?
But he wasn't there when.
No, I'm talking during the committee
we
meetings.
passed the resolution. in 2018.
I guess my thought was if you had persons from the Festivals Fredonia on the committee and they were okay with it at the time, I would agree with Dr. Barris. But if nobody from the Festivals Fredonia was on that committee, it's kind of, you really should have had somebody from the committee to be on there to offer input that this was maybe not a great idea at the time.
I did attend the last Festivals Committee meeting, and I could tell you that they were expressing their concern with the cost. They said they were having a very, very difficult time getting people to understand that there's this cost this year. And where they haven't experienced the opportunity to utilize it all year in the past, and their concern was just making the money back during the festivals if they were here. And they were hoping to get it per festival, but I still believe that we should be an all-year cost to encourage them to come regularly and not just in festivals. That way gives them actually the opportunity to come all year and not just festivals. And I did express that to them, and they seemed to encourage that it may be an opportunity for the board to reduce the cost a little bit, and that may encourage people to sign up. But right now, they were having great difficulty.
Trustee Barris, was there a rationale for the $500? What was the reasoning behind that,
The
please?
rationale was the city of Buffalo was charging $800 for each individuals. We have certain costs associated with it, which is the administrative costs of the code enforcement office regarding the discussion with the Department of Health of Chautauqua County, and also with the New York State criminal data operations. We have to have these two documents before we can approve the food permit. So that's
But
an
doesn't,
expensive effort.
so the individual businesses don't have to provide?
Each,
Document.
the brick
But
and
they
mortar
pay
restaurants
taxes.
have these documents
taxes.
on a routine basis.
So they do.
So you're saying the costs incurred to do this, background checks are normal for when somebody opens up a business, you're doing a background check
restaurant.
on them? I don't
No.
think so.
Well,
No, I don't think
what
so.
we're doing is we wanted a background check because the village, by permitting, is kind of an endorsement, if you will, okay? If you come up with a hot dog stand, okay, and the village gives you a license to run that hot dog stand, then in that way we are kind of endorsing the fact that you're okay, that you're not, that the health department has permitted you, that you're not a child molester who is using your hot dog stand to entice children. Those things are basically endorsed by the village. So those have to be required. There have been instances where municipalities have done similar things in the past to find out that the people that they licensed are not the best people in the world, and that brings liability on us.
May
And
I ask
also,
then-
one of for the $500, it was our concern for the brick and mortar people who pay taxes. They pay taxes, so they pay their fair share. And we thought that we would try to make it fair for them, so they don't think that trying to take their business away from them.
I
So that
totally
was-
agree with that point, but, so you're saying to operate a food truck, you need a background check, a criminal background check, but if I want to open a business, you don't need one, and you could be a child molester opening up a business,
Yeah, but you
per se.
understand that food trucks are
Essentially.
transient in
Right,
nature.
and-
They're transient in nature, so they move
And the
Lend
around.
themselves
transient
more
issue is
to
the problem.
possibility.
So-
Okay, because we don't have, if you open up a children's clothing store and you're a child molester, then we're going to figure out a way to get you out of here, okay? Once we find out about it. With the food trucks being transient, it makes it more difficult for us to do anything. And so the transient nature of that business, we believed in the committee at the time, requires that background check.
Okay, and all these checks are the costs associated, which drove the cost up to $500 in one aspect, maybe.
In one aspect, the truth of it is that the $500 started out as trying to split the baby between the brick and mortar people who said food trucks are gonna come in and we're not gonna make any money because all these, these fly-by-night transient businesses are gonna come in, they're gonna set, their food truck in front of my restaurant, and I'm not gonna be able to make any money. Then you had the other people that said, okay, I wanna put a food truck here every weekend. I don't want, the food trucks in Buffalo to come in and cherry pick my season once I'm paying. And that was the big issue in driving the cost. The other big issue is we did look at other communities. I mean, I want to say it was more than $800. I want to say it was like $875 for Buffalo, okay?
First
We
year.
thought that $500 was reasonable. Festivals of Fredonia, they have their interest in having as many food trucks as possible. So they'd like to do they'd like to have it done for nothing. That's their interest. Our interest is we have to have, Chief Myers, we have to have, Chuck do all these checks, make sure everything is right. We do have an interest in that, as well as the brick and mortar people have an interest in that fee.
I guess after this discussion we just had right here, I would agree with Dr. Barris in the fact that it's only been 1 month and how many days in effect?
5 days.
5 days, so at this point, see what it would,
Just so that you have a better understanding of the festival's concern, some of what they're referring to is the Farm Festival and the booths that's set up at the Farm Festival. So now you're talking about like sausage cart or a cotton candy or taffy. They all have to drop $500 to come to the Farm Festival. And they're concerned, the festivals committee is concerned that you have to sell a lot of taffy to make that $500 back. Plus you have to pay the Farm Festival fee to be there. So they're worried that, just so that, because I think everybody's got in their head a food truck. And I just want you to, when you think about that too. Because that was one of the driving conversation pieces when we were talking about lowering it to 300.
So it's all food vendors,
Yes.
any food vendor?
Yeah.
No,
Not just food trucks?
No, it's my understanding that they're not, this does not include the tents and that type of
Not
thing.
the tents up in the. But
That's not
the-
all food vendors,
but-
is what I'm saying.
But if you're down here,
Like
you're
the
selling
curly
taffy
fries
and
and stuff.
curly fries.
If it's a trailer or a truck,
Right, it's
it's
$500.
$500, correct,
Right.
yes.
Okay.
Those people then go, like they go to West Seneca, they go to Florida, they go away. They're, the concern is they're not going to get $500. They're not going to come because they're not going to come back. That's the festival's concern. I just want to shed that light upon your conversation piece. That's,
So previous to us passing this law, they didn't have to pay anything other than the fee for the farm festival,
That's
correct?
correct.
Okay, so now we're adding
Paying for the
$500
health department fee.
onto the, but it wasn't $500, was it? I don't know.
No.
I don't know how much it would be. But, so we're
It was
adding
$40 10 years ago.
So we're adding $500 onto the fees that they already had to pay to be here for the farm festival.
Right,
Yes.
yes.
Okay,
and then giving the opportunity, if they want to come back the next weekend,
right,
come back the next weekend.
yeah, okay.
A lot of them are here on Saturdays too, aren't they?
Some of them.
Some,
You know,
yeah,
most
some
of them
here
are
on
Saturdays.
Saturdays on the farmer's market and things,
So
yes.
they are here all,
They
all
can be.
season.
But I think it's important to recognize the reason we just started the discussion at all. I mean, the reason we just started the discussion at all was because food trucks were coming into the community. They were completely unregulated. There were local business owners who have a brick and mortar business, who pay their taxes, that were concerned about, cutting into their business, concerned about parking, and there was no regulation. It's appropriate for us to regulate this, and some fee is appropriate with that regulation. So we did create the law in a way that can be changed easily by resolution. We don't need to have a public hearing and a new local law and everything. We created the law so we could change this fee in the future after we found out whether or not it worked. And I think that it's appropriate to reconsider the fee, even though it hasn't gone on for that long. you know, we can still reconsider, because that was what the law was built for.
Did you have in mind or even think that it was gonna have to be changed within a month and 5 days?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah, that's why I wrote it the way I did, because this was such a complicated issue, okay? That we knew there were going to be problems. And we wanted to keep it in a way that where it was flexible to adjust to the situation that was most beneficial for the people of Fredonia.
Well, let me ask you this. The concerns are from the festivals Fredonia now. So we pass a resolution to change it and lower it. 2 months from now, every brick and mortar business comes in here and screams at us and demands that that's unfair. Do you pass another resolution to raise it again? I mean,
No, I think
That would be up to the board.
that's what's gonna happen here.
Well, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to find a happy medium between the
Right.
brick and mortar people and the people that are here all the time and the people that just come for the farm festival. We're trying to find a happy medium. It's a moving target, and I think the board needs to be flexible.
I think the idea is to actually encourage some people to do business in the community, such as food trucks, and that should the response become great, and then there's like an overwhelming number of them, then you raise the price. That's when you should, as a, in any business, that's when you raise your price. You have an overwhelming response, and you bring the fees up appropriately, and you control your business in that way, and your profit margins. So, we hope to get some response.
Sure. So, you can still think about it, and we can vote on it next time.
Okay.
And then we have the preliminary official statement from Roosevelt and Cross. And Mr. Sedota, please give us an
Anybody
outline.
gonna spend the weekend reading through this 50-page?
Of course.
report?
60 pages.
It was quite a lot.
This is required as an official statement that's used for the sale of the bonds. And it contains quite a bit of information that deals with the village's finances, with its policies. And I know it's pretty lengthy, but the underwriters asked that, to be sure that the board had a copy and had a chance to review it, and any comments they might want to make, they would be open to hearing if you have any concerns. The Friday is the deadline. We have to submit this with or without comments. And then they'll proceed with the sale, which is going to take place in probably another week or two, the actual sale of the bonds. Just as a reminder, they did quite a detailed analysis of the cost savings involved, and they're estimating that it will save at least $312,000 over the remaining 10 years of the bond issue. And that's a combination of the refunding of some of the money as a result of refinancing, and the interest rates should be lower. It's pretty complicated in some respects.
Jim, I was trying to figure out where the 2.42 million was at, because there's different amounts all over this here.
Pardon?
The $2,420,000 worth of refunding of the serial bonds, the front page does not add up to that. Is there a page that figure comes from?
Yeah, that came from them. That's actually the amount that we owe right now is 2.7 million. But when they finance these bond issues, they charge a premium, which we're going to get refunded. That's why it's called a refunding of the bonds. And so it reduced the amount to the original amount, or to the amount that they're stating of 2.42 million. Now they will add some premium back when they sell the bonds. They also pay for all of the costs associated with the sale. Are some costs associated with the sale of the bonds. And the way it was explained to me, they use some of that premium to adjust the interest rate. If the interest rate doesn't come in at what they're projecting, they'll apply some of that to lower the interest rate.
Okay.
As I said, it can be, I asked some questions today about that because, we'll find we got a refund between the 2.7 and the 2.4, but then I know they had some of it back. But this is all in part of the sale and with the underwriters and the market that they're trying to attract with our bonds. It could be insurance companies or investment firms who might be looking for a little higher interest rate than they would normally be, and if they're preparing this for other purchasers, and but they've gone through very detailed analysis, and so that's pretty much. For example, the current debt service cost right now, principal and interest, if we didn't do anything, we'd end up paying $3.5 million. But with the refunding of the debt service and the refinancing, the savings, the cost would be reduced to 3.2, or approximately $312,000. So, and that savings will be over the remaining 10 years of the bond. So,
May I comment?
Of course.
I sent an email message to the trustees, the mayor, the clerk, and the treasurer on Thursday, the 2nd of May. And may I read that message?
Please.
The mayor and trustees have received a document, quotes, $2,420,000 public improvement refunding, parentheses, serial, end parentheses, bonds 2019, end quotes. It is my opinion that the village should pay off this amount immediately from fund balances to bring those balances to 25% of annual appropriations. The reason for this is the fact that the fund balances are maintained in accounts that pay no or little interest. In consequence, the value of those balances is dissipated through inflation, even though that inflation is running less than 2% in recent years. In fact, these fund balances represent taxes and user fees collected from residents and organizations over years. Holding them removes activity from the economy. The village of Fredonia itself would inspire economic activity locally by spending these funds on physical improvements and community events, both of which would pump cash into local labor, which in turn would yield economic multiplier effects. With the high fund balances, the net effect is a negative multiplier effect. Parentheses, money is sucked out of the economy by taxation and user fees, and its value is dissipated by stagnation. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody wants to, please?
well, I'd like to respond to that. When we were applying for our bond, our rating through Moody's Investment Services, one of the things that they discouraged was us to reduce our fund balance. And if you recall, about the middle of April, you passed a resolution establishing the guidelines that you want to maintain a fund balance between 15 and 25%. So we've reached that goal in our current budget that was just approved. Now, that's just the first step. We're proposing, at least I'm proposing to you, that we're going to start having discussions about setting up reserve funds so that that money, there's probably easily $2 million available that could be used towards applying against the debt service costs that we know we're going to incur with the water and sewer projects that are in existence now. We haven't had to borrow the money yet, but we will be once the projects are under construction. So we will be applying, if you agree with what I'm suggesting, we would be applying this excess of fund balance, but we would keep it within the guidelines that you established by resolution, you know, between the 15 and 25%. If we just, first of all, on this, what you're proposing, and I know it gets confusing, but if we were to pay this off now, it wouldn't be 2.4 million. It would be 2.7 million. And if you do the math, you'll see that that gets us below the 15% guidelines, which is what you was.
My math did not show that.
Pardon?
My math did not show that.
Well, mine does. So if you look at the, we have a total of around $4 million in fund balance right now between the three funds. And the thing is that the different amounts.
Fund balance of $5 million.
Well, you're including the capital funds also.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
But not all the
But-
capital fund is available, correct? Because some
Right.
of it is
Right.
earmarked for fire
Correct.
department equipment,
Correct,
a good amount.
yeah. Only about 400,000 of that is actually excess fund balance in the capital funds. So that's why it wasn't included. But even at that, you're still under your 15%. But the other point, and I raised this with our financial advisors, is that if we were to do that, we're proposing to do another bond issue in September. And the underwriters would not maintain the rating, the bond rating that we have now if we deplete our fund balance. So there are several reasons not to consider that at this time. But again, when we get into the discussion about the reserve funds, it will be suggested that you earmark some or all of the reserve funds that are available to be used against future debt service. So to reduce the amount we'd have to borrow for these projects that are already ongoing.
And I believe that you stated that there was going to be a possibility of investing some of into
Right, that's-
because that hasn't been done, and it's a
Correct.
possibility to
If you
get a
recall-
return on that.
Yeah.
Short-term investments.
It's, if you recall, I mentioned that another step that I'll end up being involved in will be investing on short-term U.S. Treasury bills. And I feel that we probably have easily $2 million available. They're short-term investments, so you control them, but they're paying over 2%. Well,
That's
could be
more than-
$30,000 or $40,000
And that's higher than
in
inflation.
additional interest that we're not getting right now.
Right.
Taxpayers?
I read my memo. I stand by it.
Thank you. Mr. Russ?
I agree with Treasurer Sedota. It would deplete our fund balance below our already passed policy. And if we do that and Moody's changes our bond rating, then the money you just saved on maybe doing that, you're gonna be losing in future bond notes or whatever that we get in the future, that you'll be paying higher interest. And that's not advantageous for the village.
Yeah, I agree with Mr. Sedota also.
Okay.
Yeah, I have reservations, I understand what I think I understand what Dr. Barris is saying, but I have concerns about doing that. So I would prefer not to at this point, I guess.
Thank you. Are we all done? Mr. Dunn? Okay. Then we go to Fredonia Police Department report for the month of March. Have the buildings inspector's report for April. And our requirement for homeowner installation of sidewalks in the village. This is something that just came up this morning at the department, the head of the department monthly meeting. And what brought it about was that Steve Manos walked the whole village and marked all the violations, the sidewalk violations throughout the village. And as I understand it, if I understand it correctly, they're quite enough. They're a lot, actually. So the discussion started as to, do we start pushing the policy that we have to start, sending the violations notes to the homeowners or the business owners, or how do we approach that? And then there were some other questions as to if we need to rethink the policy that at this moment is, at the village, we have the village to not having to have a sidewalk if your adjacent houses doesn't have a high sidewalk. And then there is the other thing that maybe they don't have a sidewalk, but both sides of your house, both sides of your lot, there's a driveway. So what do you do in that circumstance? I think we should revisit that. I very seriously believe, I do believe that we need sidewalks in the village. And maybe we consider substituting or giving the homeowners a little more than 50% if it's a first time, if there is no sidewalk there and they have to do it from the beginning. So I thought I should bring it for some discussion.
I have a comment. When I saw this on the agenda this afternoon, I reread the section on sidewalks in the village code. And I can remind the trustees and the mayor that this sidewalks is a major issue when I ran for election. So my thought is that the village should be exclusively responsible for construction and maintenance of the sidewalks. This would require a revision of the law, which was passed in 2009.
So for the construction and the maintenance.
And the insurance. So currently the property owners are responsible for accidents which occur on their property. The village should accept liability. This was the major issue in 2009, and the reason why the Observer reported that the village would not take on exclusive responsibility for maintenance of sidewalks. There's an issue with economic discrimination. Not all people are who own property in the village are able to finance the construction of sidewalks. It would require the village or the current law requires the village essentially, if the law is enforced, to inquire into the economic situation of each individual property owner in order to determine whether they qualify for construction supplementation. I think this is a gross invasion of privacy of the citizens and the property owners of the village of Fredonia.
Thank you. I have to say that my understanding of the way the law was executed actually was that irrespective of the economic situation, the village could pay 50%, not up to 50% as it was on the law, but they paid 50%. That was my understanding.
The issue was that the village has to inquire as to whether they're eligible to receive the financial discount.
That was not my understanding. Maybe,
Yes,
right.
I read it this afternoon.
I don't recall saying.
I have to look at it.
Yeah, that was not my understanding. If that's correct, I agree with you. I mean, that's, then it is invasive privacy.
My understanding was that when it said eligible, would be that they would apply for this funding. And if that funding was not used up for that year, they would become eligible. That's what was my understanding. So until, if they got in early, they, applied, and then they would receive their portion of that until it's used up. Once it's used up, it's no longer eligible for that year. That was my understanding of the regulations.
Okay, well, Dan is going to look into it and come back.
I also like the idea of looking into this further. The planning board has adopted a policy of complete streets according to New York state law, and that encourages a walkable community, and a walkable community has sidewalks. So,
I think the issue is always who's going to pay for them.
correct.
That's the issue.
It's always the
And
issue.
if you go to somebody who doesn't have a sidewalk right now and request that they have to do it, sometimes that's very expensive, and sometimes they cannot. So I think that's where the problem is. Not that they don't want a sidewalk, is that they don't know how to pay for it. And that's where the board comes to
Chuck,
set some parameters.
how many people, how many residences are we speaking of here, roughly?
There's quite a few.
Quite a bit? What's a lot?
5,000.
I don't have a count, but there's a lot of sidewalks.
There's 5,000 residents in violation?
No, in violation, no, 5,000 altogether.
Okay.
So,
No, he was asking how
I mean,
many
Birchwood
violations.
hit an entire street, Birchwood, Middlesex, Chestnut. I mean, there are
Chestnut
entire
is
streets,
the
I
whole
mean, there's
street.
hundreds and hundreds of homes without.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the way I understand it, the code only, where you're required to put in a sidewalk, only addresses those areas where there's a sidewalk on either side of your property.
Yeah, I didn't mean that they were in violation,
No,
I just meant that there are hundreds
Yeah.
without sidewalks.
And I brought it in front of the board actually to address that, because, you know what happened in the past. They just cooperated one with the other, so everybody took out their sidewalks. And then if you try to walk on Chestnut Street, it's extremely difficult and very, very dangerous to walk there. So I think the board should revisit that actually and see how, the money is always a factor, but I do think that sidewalks are necessary in the village.
I point out that both the mayor and myself have been injured by falls on sidewalks. So it cost me several $100s to repair the damage to my person. So other people have indicated that they have fallen on the sidewalks. The condition of the sidewalks discourages people from walking.
Who's responsible for the maintenance of the sidewalks? Does the code say
The
that?
property owners are in the current law. I'm proposing a revision in the current law. But
So the
we have
property owner is
a major
responsible.
problem in the village of Fredonia with obesity, which is related to mortality and longevity. So if the sidewalks were maintained in an appropriate fashion, a socially responsible fashion, then these public health issues would be dissipated. This was the major concern of my campaign in 2017 for the office of trustee of the village of Fredonia.
Maybe when looking into the sidewalks program, because we have adopted the Complete Streets program, there may be an opportunity for grants to help initiate.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
So that might be a area to look into, because that was the reason, one of the reasons the New York State requested communities to adopt it as part of their policy in the planning, so that there may be grants available. So we could look into that as a walkable community.
Chuck, are sidewalks on the village's right-of-way, or that's where the right-of-way starts on that side of the sidewalk between that and the curb? That's the right-of-way, and is the sidewalks, are they on individuals' private property?
I think they're in the right away.
Are they?
Yeah, if you look at when they survey the properties, they stop right at the sidewalk.
So that would technically
But
be the
law-
right-of-way?
But the law says that they're responsible for it in front of the driveway, there's no removal, maintenance of the sidewalk. And I think a lot of communities are like that. Most communities, sidewalks are in the right of way. I think we really, for this year, just take baby steps and get some of the ones that are really bad and that are, lifted up where people are falling, tripping over them and stuff. I think we address those for now. Next year, maybe throw some more money into the budget to do more. This isn't gonna, we're not gonna get the whole village done in a year.
No.
And it's just not conceivable, but at least we should start and address some of the bad sidewalks that are out there. And then maybe next year, see how far the money goes. Next year, throw more money into it, and hopefully in a couple of years, we'll get it addressed and, we'll have sidewalks throughout the village. But I don't think we should, I don't think right now, where there is no sidewalk, I think it would be very difficult to make people put them in. I think
It's been an
just
issue
gonna end up
for
in court.
Yes, it
Twenty
Or the
is.
village is gonna do it and, charge the
I mean,
homeowner.
what do you think of the idea of the village taking over?
Taking over completely the sidewalks?
Dr. Barces' proposal?
Well, I think we'd have to look at how much that would cost.
I don't think
There's a
that,
money, how much is that gonna cost? Right.
I don't think that's.
So it's not only the cost for construction and maintenance, it's also the cost for the insurance
Right,
premium.
exactly.
In 2009, Mayor Pagano made the point that the insurance premiums would be approximately equal to the costs of construction and maintenance of sidewalks, which includes snow plowing.
On an annual basis. So,
So-
I mean, you're talking a large amount of
We're
money.
talking about a large amount, yeah, that's
Well,
correct.
I think he was.
I mean, currently, they're covered under the homeowner's policy. That, the liability is on the homeowner's policy.
The cost of construction would be amortized across several years, given the life expectancy of the sidewalk. No?
You can't, it's a sidewalk.
You wouldn't be able to amortize a sidewalk over 20 years.
No.
Or 10 years.
Well, then,
You could amortize it, yeah, you could spread the cost out.
so the question was, what does the annual premium equal to, and how does that relate to the cost for maintenance, snow plowing, and construction, so whatever the sidewalk cost is, you have to divide that by the number of years of life expectancy and figure that into the annual cost.
What do communities that have sidewalks do? How do they do it? Communities that have sidewalks.
Every city has a different regulation,
they
even within
maintain?
New York State. New York City requires property owners to maintain sidewalks.
Right.
Right.
So, and they have to be cleared of snow within 24 hours of a snowfall.
When you're looking to incur new costs, I think we should look more, at if you're looking at spending that kind of money, is repairing our streets. Our streets need a lot more
I
attention.
think we need sidewalks more than we need streets.
I think we need both.
I'm personally hostile to automobile operation. I would be perfectly happy if automobiles were not permitted within the village of Fredonia.
Tony, you
So,
Thank you.
Today I had 2 or 3 sidewalk applications that I went out and looked at, and we've already done a good number, a fair number. I agree with Chuck. I think that instead of trying to fix this all in one fell swoop, we'd all love to, including me,
Of course.
Doctor. But realizing the difficulty in getting a grant or the size of the funds it would take to build the whole network, I think that the best way to do it is to just incrementally throw more money into the program that does work very well. I think it's a very generous program to homeowners for the reimbursement amounts, especially if there's a tree issue involved. And most people that take advantage are very happy that the board and the village have offered that recompensation. So my read on it is, it needs more attention, absolutely, because I've seen Steve out walking, and I've got issues on some of my own thoughts, but put more money into a program that's working quite well. Granted, not on the scale we all want. That's just my thought.
Okay.
I have had residents express their gratitude for that shared cost over the last year particularly.
Tax Paris.
In 2017, in the summer, I discovered a federal grant which would provide complete construction and maintenance for sidewalks for model communities. I gave copies to each of the member of the then trustees and the mayor, and there was no further discussion. There was no submission of an application. We missed the opportunity to be a model community.
Of course, at the time, we had no grant writer, and I was...
We had myself, and I offered to write it. I have written grants totaling approximately $1 million that have been awarded.
I
by the
remember
National
asking you to
Institutes
write
of
it. In my office, I asked you to write it, if you remember.
Did I refuse?
Yes.
I thought we should,
Yes, you did,
considering
actually.
what it was, and how important it was for public health.
No, I agree with you.
We could have made that investment.
I agree
into
with
a
you,
grant.
and if I remember very well, actually, that my point was that I don't believe the village is eligible to apply for a federal grant. You said you disagreed. And,
I certainly do. I still
yes,
disagree.
and I
absolutely.
ask you then to please look into it and apply for the village as soon as you became a trustee. So,
I think it warrants further discussion, absolutely.
yes, absolutely. All right.
This is the further discussion.
I don't know, I don't think so. I think it's an issue
Do
that
you
I'm
still have a
concerned
copy
with.
of your grant application with the requirements?
I had the request for proposals. Yes, I do. It's available on the National Institutes of Health
If you
website.
want to
Progressive.
look at it, there's
Progressive
some
Maybe we need a
process.
committee.
That's what she's
Well,
proposing.
it's moot now because it's not open. So the deadline passed. So that was, the presidential administration has changed since then. The current administration is hostile to such concerns.
All right, thank you. We do need to revisit that. I guess what we're saying is that we're starting with the places with the biggest problems, and we go along for as long as we have the money. I think Brad suggested this morning to give these homeowners a time frame and make it clear that for as long as the money exists, first come, first serve, they will get reimbursed. Now, after the money, the current year's money is exhausted, then they have to wait for the next year. But maybe we can give them something like 2 or 3 years to apply for this money or to be eligible for this money. Let's say they spend it this year, but for the next 3 years, they're eligible to apply for this money. And maybe we can discuss that.
That sounds like a good plan, because that's not a cheap thing if you have to replace your sidewalks. And I'm pretty sure most residents in the village of Fredonia don't have $2,000 or $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 just sitting around waiting to spend on something like that. And it might take a year or two to accumulate that funding to redo that, so that's very good.
Yeah. All right. We have no old business, so is there anything else you want to discuss?
Yes.
Please.
I've distributed a one-page handout entitled Science for a Built Heritage. It's written by Jeremy C. Wells, Assistant Professor in the School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation at the University of Maryland. It appears in Science Magazine on the 3rd of May, 2019. It speaks about the importance of buildings as it preserves the character of the culture. So these are issues that I think have importance for the village of Fredonia, which has a history of historic buildings, some of which have been lost to fire. It makes a particular reference to the fire in Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris last month. Okay?
Yes, very well. We read it. Thank you so much. Anything else? No. Okay, so I guess we have another minute and then we'll go to the meeting.
Number 5, to adopt the resolution. Anne Marina, I need to run downstairs and make that change.
Okay,
that's
yeah,
what she
all
writes.
right. Go, Dave.
Yeah, give us 5
About five,
hours.
about
Just
5.
email it to her,
Okay.
just put it in.
Okay.
I'll use the restroom.
5 minutes.
Never heard of it.
Come on.
Good evening. I call this meeting to order. A regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of the Village of Fredonia, excuse me, duly called and held on the 6th day of May 2019 at 7:40 p.m. in the Trustees Room, 2nd floor, Village Hall, Fredonia, New York, and public notice of the time and place of this meeting has been given to the news media and conspicuously posted in one or more designated public locations in accordance with Section 104 of the Open Meetings Law.
Whereas members of this board present at this meeting have read the official minutes of the Board of Trustees regular meeting of April 29, 2019. Now therefore be it resolved, this board approves the minutes as entered into the official minutes, and be it further resolved that the reading of the minutes be dispensed with.
I second that.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Asek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
Aye.
Please note that Trustee Bridge is absent. Public portion.
This portion of the meeting is for public comment. Any member of the public wishing to speak, once recognized, shall stand and state their name and address. Speakers will be allowed 3 minutes if speaking for themselves, or 5 minutes if speaking on behalf of a group. I will ask the speakers to refrain from remarks that are in poor taste, slanderous, or not germane to any action taken or contemplated by the board.
Okay, there's nobody here, so we close the public portion. My report. Well, I have a couple of things. First of all, Nightford Fest was this past weekend. Before I say anything, I want to commend the police officers for their extremely conscientious and professional way they do their work. I was lucky enough to be with Chief Myers and drive around for a few hours, or more than a few, about 6 hours actually, Saturday night, and it was an eye-opener for me. I have mixed feelings about that. The whole event, you can call it Fred Fest or not Fred Fest, or the last weekend in May, doesn't matter. Overall, it's loud, it's dirty, it's disorderly sometimes. I said before that I am all for the kids having a good time, just as long as they are safe and just as long as they respect other people and other people's properties. I will reconvene the committee for the Night Fred Fest to see if there are any other ways that we can help so the village doesn't feel the effects for so long. I also want to thank very much the fire department and the transport units that they were there, and last but not least, the volunteers The volunteers did an excellent, excellent job. And I have to say this, Saturday morning, I was driving up Forest Street, and it was very early, it was about 9 o'clock. On one side of the street, there were these high school kids who were picking up all the garbage, and they were cleaning up. And going a little further up, on the other side of the street, there were these kids, and they were drinking, and they were partying. So in effect, they were cleaning for them to dirty it again. Anyways, I'm glad that it's over and nothing bad happened, let's say. So that's one thing. The next thing is on Saturday morning, I attended the Stockholm County Memorial, Employees Memorial, which is a memorial for people who died during work. I never thought of them as in numbers. The numbers are really big, and I was surprised for that. These are people who leave their houses in the morning to go to work and never return. They read all the names, and they gave them, they honored them. It's very difficult to live through an event like that, and it makes so much more clear. It made in my mind how important it is to keep our people, the people who work for the village, the people who work for all municipalities, to keep them safe, to give them a good environment, a safe environment. And that brings me to the next point. Since the very beginning, I said that I stand behind each and every employee of this village in every possible way. Why am I saying this? Well, this is a sad thing, but I do have to report it. A few weeks ago, one of the trustees came to the village hall, extremely angry, and engaged in a behavior that was in direct violation to the policy against workplace violence that this village has adopted. The behavior made some village employees feel intimidated to the point that they wanted to close doors, and embarrassed in the thought that a resident could come in and hear the yelling. Same trustee, although appeared to have calmed down, when left, went straight to the DPW and engaged in the same exact behavior. This time, however, also used excessive profanity, general threats like, "I have to say November is coming," more specific threats like, "I only need one more vote and he's fired," and comments like, "I voted against our queen over there, but." When I got into politics, I knew I expected some personal attacks. So I'm fine with them. I don't really mind them. What I do mind are attacks against employees. We have a policy in this village, and the board is aware of that. As I had the responsibility to do, I informed them. I will inform the Department of Labor, as I still have the responsibility of doing. But I want the employees to know that I still stand behind them, that no matter what the board decides, no matter what happens, this is not acceptable. You have the right to be treated with respect, decency, and understanding. So I'm really sorry that happened, and I have to be, although it's a sad story, at least we have a policy now, and we are in compliance with the state of New York. So this is my comments. Trustee Christina, any report?
I just would like to echo your thanks to everybody who helped maintain some calm in the midst of the storm over the weekend. And I'm glad you're going to reconvene the committee because I think it's something that we need to revisit. I think that I think the village deserves better, and I'm not sure what the purpose or function of the Not Fred Fest or whatever you want to call it is. It's one thing to have fun and celebrate, but it's another thing to trash your community. So I think that it's something that we need to relook at and talk about and think about addressing maybe in some other ways or different ways. So thank you for doing that, and I volunteer to be on the committee. So.
Thank you. Great. Trustee Linden.
Yes, I too also want to thank the many people who were involved in maintaining our community and the quality of life in our community. Thank you so much. I have long supported an open and welcoming and socially engaging community, and that lends to a better quality of life. But tell you, many people involved in this event that took place believe they can come to Fredonia and act with intended incivility. This is not respectful or acceptable. And I hope to do everything I can to, as a trustee and a representative of this community, to correct that and find solutions so this type of behavior doesn't continue.
Thank you. Trustee Assett.
Like everyone else is saying, Brad, thank you, and the rest of our first responders who worked long hours throughout the weekend. I don't support Fred Fest, unFred Fest. I think it's a useless thing. It was something that was pawned off from the college to the village. Just because we have volunteer groups at the end of the day on Sunday that clean it all up and make it look like nothing ever happened doesn't necessarily mean that that's the right thing. I understand it. Kids need to exercise some freedom, but when you preach and impend or whatever on somebody else's freedoms, that's an issue. So we do need to look into that and very seriously address that. Also this Saturday, I attended a event at the fairgrounds, Touch the Truck. It was put on by Partners in Kind. I guess it went towards different various charities. It was an event that children, and whether it be handicapped or not, were able to touch trucks, get into trucks, police cars, cranes, you name it, school buses, and it was really a neat thing. So I enjoyed that, and thank you to Partners in Kind for putting that on.
Trustee Barnes.
On Wednesday last, I met with a congressional candidate who was not the incumbent, and we spoke for an hour and a half about age limits on use of chemically ingested substances. This relates to non-fed press because it would remove the age limit for alcohol consumption. So people, regardless of age, would be able to go into a restaurant and order alcoholic beverages, as is done in certain countries like Portugal. So I think this is a federal issue because the federal government has insisted that there be a nationwide 21-year first age of permissible alcohol consumption. So we cannot change the age limits until the federal government first acts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Dodd, anything? Mr. Garrett?
No, madam.
Great, reports.
Fredonia Police Department report for the month of March 2019. 805 incidents reported. Fredonia Central School calls for service 4, accidents 22, arrests reported 46, vehicle and traffic 54, parking tickets 48. The next report is code enforcement report for the month of April 2019. Building permits issued 38, inspections 15, certificates of occupancy 12, certificates of compliance 20, violations found 19, violations satisfied 18, permit fees collected $3,892.40, rental fees $3,025, certificate of compliance $675 for a total of $7,592.40. And those are the reports.
Thank you very much. Let's go to resolutions.
Whereas the concrete wall on Porter Avenue requires emergency repairs to prevent its collapse, which would destroy the village's 12-inch water line as well as disrupt the water flow of the creek. And whereas Patriot Design and Consulting has offered to provide the design, permitting, and bidding of this project at a cost of $5,278.99. And whereas to effectuate this repair, the village needs to transfer $5,278.99 from budget line H8140 to line H8344. Therefore, be it resolved, the mayor is hereby authorized and directed to enter into an agreement with Patriot Design and Consulting in an amount not to exceed $5,278.99.
I second that.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
Aye.
And that's it. Can I have it?
No.
No?
We have another one.
Okay.
Two more.
So somebody has to make a motion, right?
Four.
Somebody to take it off from the table, to put it for resolution. It was the
I'll
table.
move to take it off the table.
I'll second that motion to take it off the table.
Okay.
Do we need to have a vote for that?
Oh,
I vote
No.
yes. Oh, we don't?
We don't
To
need a
take it
vote.
off the
We need a
table,
vote
that's
for the
it?
motion.
I'm sorry, I'm getting confused.
They taking the resolution for the North Carolina District Office.
They can take it off the table and then vote on it, yes.
So we can vote on it.
No.
You read it.
Just read it.
Okay.
Okay. Whereas the North Chautauqua County Water District is in the process of upgrading its system, and be it resolved that the village board hereby supports the village's cooperation with the district.
I second that resolution.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
Aye.
And that's the last one?
That's
Okay. Can I have a motion for adjournment?
I move to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Trustee Christina?
Yes.
Trustee Linden?
Aye.
Trustee Essek?
Yes.
Trustee Barris?
Aye.
Anne Marie was going to do it, but they didn't give us any notice, and she was confused.